3 seconds. That's how long it took for Maya Reese to shatter every boundary she'd spent a decade building. 3 seconds of lips against a stranger's mouth, tasting aged scotch and danger, before she realized she'd just signed a contract written in blood. The crimson glow of Euphoria nightclub didn't pulse anymore. It held its breath, waiting. She pulled back slowly, her heart performing acrobatics against her ribs, expecting confusion or perhaps mild irritation. What she found instead made her blood run cold. Intent. Kang Minho's eyes locked onto hers with the precision of a predator selecting prey, obsidian and unreadable and absolutely devastating. He was built like violence given human form, not the manufactured bulk of gym enthusiasts, but the kind of mass that came from years of breaking bones and worse. His presence devoured oxygen. The ink creeping up his throat vanished beneath a collar that cost more than her car payment, and his hands, God, those hands rested on the lacquered table like loaded weapons on display. One of them was bleeding. Fresh crimson decorated his knuckles, gleaming wet under the neon wash. Someone else's blood, her mind supplied helpfully, and her stomach performed a slow roll. "You taste like a woman with terrible survival instincts," he said, his voice carrying the weight of finality, like a judge reading a sentence. Maya's throat constricted. It was just a dare. Nothing more. Just, he echoed, testing how the word felt in his mouth. Then his hand moved, deliberate rather than fast, closing around her wrist. Not crushing, not yet, but claiming. Marking. "You have no concept of what you've initiated." She tried to withdraw, but his grip was immovable, not painful but absolute, like trying to escape gravity itself. "I'm fine, really. You can release me now. The game is finished." His gaze finally dropped to her face, not wandering, not softening, simply calculating like she was an equation he needed to solve before determining her value. "Games have regulations," he murmured, his thumb finding her pulse point and pressing gently. "And penalties." Around them, the club continued its chaotic dance. Someone's laughter cut through the bass line. Glass exploded somewhere near the pool tables. A woman shrieked with drunken joy. But in their isolated bubble, time moved like honey, thick and slow. He released her wrist finally, placing that massive hand on the table beside her hip instead, close enough that she remained trapped by his proximity alone. She noticed the blood on his knuckles hadn't dried yet. "You shouldn't allow people to manipulate you into foolish decisions," he said, an edge in his voice that made her spine straighten involuntarily. "I wanted to," Maya heard herself respond, lifting her chin with false bravado. "Nobody forced me." That earned her something different. Not a smile, but interest, sharp and focused. He studied her for another endless moment, and she studied him back. The harsh geometry of his jaw, the intricate tattoo work that emerged from his collar and traced the side of his neck in patterns she couldn't decipher in the crimson lighting. The small silver hoops piercing his ears that somehow amplified his danger instead of softening it. Then he stepped backward, creating distance as if he'd never invaded her space. "Exercise caution," he said. Just that. Nothing more. Maya didn't wait for elaboration. She pivoted and walked back toward her table, forcing her legs into a normal rhythm despite her heart attempting to punch through her sternum. Behind her, his stare burned between her shoulder blades like a brand. Her best friend Tasha was already talking before Maya reached the booth. "Holy hell, what did he say? Did he lose it?" "That was absolutely insane, Maya." "His security nearly." Nothing occurred, Maya interrupted, sliding into her seat and reaching for her cocktail with a hand that betrayed the slightest tremor. "It was fine." "Fine?" Val's eyebrows disappeared into her hairline. "Girl, you just kissed the most terrifying man in this establishment, and he looked at you like he was calculating whether to murder you or marry you." Maya laughed, but the sound rang hollow even to her own ears. She drained half her glass, embracing the burn. "You're being melodramatic." Am I? Val leaned forward, dropping her voice. Because I'm fairly certain I just witnessed a predator mark his territory. 3 seconds, Maya said firmly. And now it's history. Except it wasn't. She knew it wasn't because even as she attempted to focus on her friends, attempted to lose herself in the music and alcohol and celebration of freedom from a marriage that had slowly suffocated her, she could feel him watching. Every time she glanced toward the VIP section, he was there, sitting in that same position, observing, not staring, not leering, simply aware, tracking her movements with the patience of someone who possessed infinite time. 1 hour crawled into 2. Maya danced, laughed, posed for selfies with Tasha and Val, performed every action she could to convince herself the kiss meant nothing, that the man in the corner was just another story she'd share someday about the wild night she celebrated her divorce. But when she excused herself to the restroom, she discovered him waiting in the corridor. Jesus Christ, Maya pressed her palm against her chest, her heart lurching violently. You scared me. Kang Minho stood with his spine against the wall, arms folded across his chest, looking like he'd been stationed there for hours rather than seconds. Up close, removed from the crimson lighting, she could examine him more clearly. The precise fade of his haircut, the way his dress shirt molded across his chest and shoulders like it had been custom-made for his frame, the ice in his eyes that suggested fear was a foreign concept to him. That was the objective, he said simply. Maya straightened, attempting to reclaim some of the confidence she'd felt when this had been merely a dare. Are you stalking me? You kiss me in my establishment, he said, as if that explained everything. Perhaps it did. Your establishment? Her voice climbed an octave. My city, actually. The club is merely one piece. Something cold slithered down her vertebrae. She glanced back toward the main room, suddenly conscious of how isolated this hallway was, how the music masked any sound. Listen, I apologize if I offended you. It genuinely was just a dare. Nothing personal. I'm aware. He pushed off the wall and she fought the impulse to retreat. But you selected me. Out of everyone in that room, your friends indicated me specifically and you agreed. You were the most severe-looking person here, she said. It was funnier that way. Funnier. This time, there might have been amusement in his voice. Might have been. You possess zero survival instincts. Excuse me. The man you kissed, Kang Minho said, moving closer, was in the middle of negotiating how many fingers to remove from someone who owed him money. The man you kissed has 19 bodies attributed to his name. The man you kissed controls half the illegal operations in Koreatown and is currently under investigation by 4 federal agencies. Maya's breath caught in her throat. You're lying. And you approached me, he continued, his voice dropping to something almost intimate. Placed your hands on my jacket, pulled me down, and kissed me like you had absolute authority to do so. He was close now, close enough that she could smell him, something expensive and clean beneath the faint metallic scent of blood. Close enough that she had to tilt her head backward to maintain eye contact. That kind of audacity, he said softly, is either magnificent or suicidal. I haven't determined which yet. I'm just a crisis consultant, Maya whispered. I handle corporate disasters. I'm nobody important. Kang Minho's hand rose and she flinched, but he only brushed his thumb across her lower lip with devastating gentleness. You're not nobody, he said quietly. Not anymore. Then he stepped back, adjusting his cuffs like they'd been discussing weather patterns. Return to your friends. Complete your celebration. But understand something, Maya Reese. Her name in his mouth sent electricity racing down her arms. You entered my world tonight. Exiting isn't as simple as walking back out that door. He turned and walked back toward the VIP section, leaving her standing in the hallway with her pulse thundering and her mind spinning. How did he know her name? She hadn't told him her name. Maya returned to her booth on autopilot, smiling and nodding at whatever Tasha and Val were discussing without really hearing them. Her gaze kept drifting to the VIP section, to the man who'd just tilted her entire world sideways. She watched him through the crowd, watched him lean in to speak with one of his security team, watched him check his phone with unchanging expression, watched him glance up once, catch her staring, and hold her gaze until she looked away first. "I think we should leave," Maya said abruptly. "What?" "No way," Tasha protested. "We just arrived. It's been 4 hours, and I have an early meeting tomorrow." "A lie, but necessary." "You two stay. I'll call a car." She didn't wait for their protests. She grabbed her clutch, threw cash on the table, and wove through the crowd with single-minded determination. The night air struck her like a physical blow, cold and sharp after the oppressive heat inside. Maya pulled out her phone, fingers shaking slightly as she summoned a ride. For minutes away. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly feeling exposed on the street corner. Euphoria's neon sign bathed everything in crimson, making the shadows deeper, more threatening. A black SUV pulled up to the curb, and for one panicked moment, Maya thought. But then the window descended, revealing her driver, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes who asked if she was Maya. "Yes, thank God," Maya breathed, climbing into the back seat. As the car pulled away from the curb, she twisted to look back at the club. In the window of the VIP section, a figure stood watching her departure. Kang Minho raised one hand in a gesture that could have been a farewell or a promise. Maya woke to sunlight stabbing through the blinds of her apartment and a headache that felt vindictive. She lay motionless, staring at the ceiling, trying to assemble the previous night into something coherent. The celebration, the dare, the kiss, the hallway conversation that felt more like a threat than flirtation. "You entered my world tonight. Exiting isn't as simple as walking back out." She groaned, pressing her palms against her eyes. It was just intimidation tactics from a man who clearly enjoyed wielding power over people. She was a crisis management consultant, for God's sake. She dealt with powerful, dangerous men constantly. CEOs who'd committed fraud, politicians with skeletons in their closets, celebrities with literal bodies buried in their past. This was no different. Except it was. Because none of those men had ever looked at her the way Kang Minho had. None of them had made her feel like prey and partner simultaneously. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Maya reached for it, expecting a text from Tasha or Val asking if she'd gotten home safely. Instead, there were 5 missed calls from her office. At 7 in the morning on a Saturday. Her stomach dropped. She called back immediately, and her assistant answered on the first ring. "Maya, thank God. I know it's your day off, but a pause." The sound of papers shuffling. "We have a situation. A new client purchased a controlling stake in the firm overnight. He's requesting you specifically." "Who?" But even as she asked, Maya already knew. "A Mr. Kang Minho. He's waiting in the main conference room." And Maya, her assistant's voice dropped to a whisper, he brought his attorneys and security. Substantial security. Maya sat up slowly, the room tilting slightly. "I'll be there in 40 minutes. She ended the call and sat on the edge of her bed, processing. The kiss had lasted 3 seconds. 3 seconds that altered everything. 3 seconds that proved Kang Minho meant every word he'd said in that hallway. She wasn't nobody anymore. And exiting his world was going to be infinitely more difficult than she'd thought. Because Kang Minho hadn't just marked her as prey. He'd acquired her company. And Maya Reese had a sinking feeling that this was only the beginning. Hello, my fierce hearts and midnight wanderers. Before we lose ourselves in this story, make sure you're subscribed and hit that like button to let me know you're here. In the comments, tell me, where in the world are you listening from tonight? I love seeing how far our dark romance family reaches. Your support means everything and keeps these stories alive. So find a comfortable spot, dim the lights, and let's begin. The elevator to Reese and Sterling Consulting had never moved so slowly. Maya watched the numbers climb. 12, 13, 14. Each floor bringing her closer to whatever hell waited on the 16th. Her reflection in the polished steel doors showed a woman dressed for combat. Charcoal pencil skirt, silk blouse the color of dried blood, heels sharp enough to qualify as weapons. She'd pulled her natural curls into a tight bun, exposing the sharp angles of her jaw and cheekbones. Armor, her grandmother would have called it. The office felt wrong the moment she stepped through the glass doors. Too silent. The receptionist's desk sat abandoned, her computer monitor still glowing with an unfinished email. Maya's heels clicked against marble floors that suddenly sounded too loud, each step echoing in the unnatural quiet. The usual morning chaos, phones ringing, keyboards clattering, junior associates arguing over coffee, had been replaced by something that felt like the moment before detonation. She saw them through the glass walls of the main conference room. 8 men in black suits flanking the table like sentinels. Her business partner, Richard Sterling, sat in the corner, his normally florid face gone the color of spoiled milk. And at the head of the table, exactly where Richard should have been sitting, was Kang Minho. He'd exchanged the bloodstained shirt from the club for an expensive suit, charcoal gray, perfectly tailored to emphasize the breadth of his shoulders and the narrowness of his waist. His tattoos were concealed beneath crisp white cotton, the collar buttoned high enough to hide the ink that crawled up his neck. He looked legitimate, professional, like a businessman instead of what he truly was. That made him infinitely more dangerous. Maya pushed through the door without knocking, letting it swing shut behind her with a decisive click. She met Kang Minho's gaze across the room and refused to let hers drop first. "Mr. Sterling, what's happening here?" Richard opened his mouth, but only a strangled sound emerged. "Mr. Sterling is no longer relevant to this discussion," Kang Minho said, his voice carrying that same dark calm it had in the club. He leaned back in the chair, her chair technically since she owned 51% of this firm, and gestured to the seat across from him. "Sit down." "I'd prefer to stand." "I wasn't asking." His eyes tracked her with predatory focus, and Maya felt the weight of every person in the room observing this power struggle unfold. She'd spent 12 years building this company from nothing, clawing her way through an industry that had tried to shove her into a corner labeled diversity hire. She wasn't about to surrender it to some criminal because of a 3-second kiss. But her legs carried her to the chair anyway. Survival instinct, perhaps, or the recognition that sometimes you chose your battles carefully, and this room full of armed men wasn't the hill to die on. Kang Minho slid a manila folder across the polished wood. It moved silently, deliberately, coming to rest perfectly centered in front of her. "Open it." Maya's fingers trembled slightly as she lifted the cover. Inside were photographs, high resolution, professional quality. The man from the club, the one who'd been begging at Kang Minho's feet. Only in these images, he wasn't begging. He was sprawled on concrete in an alley, his head twisted at an angle that defied anatomy. Blood had pooled beneath him, black in the camera flash. His eyes were still open, staring at nothing. She swallowed the bile rising in her throat and flipped to the next photograph. Same man, different angle. Then another. And another. 14 photographs documenting the systematic destruction of a human being. "The police report will indicate a drug overdose," Kang Minho said conversationally, as if discussing weather patterns. Tragic, really. A promising young accountant destroyed by addiction. His family will receive a generous settlement from an anonymous benefactor. They'll be able to bury him with dignity. Maya forced herself to look up from the photos to meet those dark, depthless eyes. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because you need to comprehend what you've walked into." He stood, buttoning his suit jacket with practiced ease, and walked around the table, each step measured, controlled. He stopped behind her chair, close enough that she could smell him. Cedar and smoke and something sharper underneath, like ozone before lightning strikes. "My public image requires sanitization. You're going to provide it." "I'm a crisis management consultant. not a criminal defense attorney. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. If you want legal help, hire. I don't need legal help. I need a miracle worker. His hand came down on the back of her chair, and she felt the heat of him through the leather. Last night, there was an incident at one of my warehouses. A gas leak caused an explosion. Very tragic. 14 people died. A gas leak. The words tasted like ash. That's the official story. He leaned down, his mouth close enough to her ear that his breath stirred the tiny hairs at her nape. The unofficial story is that those 14 people were stealing from me. The unofficial story is that I made an example of them. The unofficial story ends with gasoline and a match and screams that nobody will ever hear again. Maya's hands clenched in her lap, nails biting into her palms hard enough to leave crescents. You want me to cover up mass murder? I want you to do what you do best. He straightened, walking back around to face her. I've reviewed your file, Miss Reese. Very impressive. The pharmaceutical executive caught with underage prostitutes, you transformed that into a story about a man seeking treatment for sex addiction. The tech CEO who embezzled $70 million, you made him look like a victim of identity theft. The senator with the dead intern in his vehicle, you got him reelected with a campaign about forgiveness and redemption. Each case he listed was a scar on her conscience, a piece of her soul she'd sold for money and reputation. Hearing them cataloged so clinically made her feel stripped naked, exposed in ways that had nothing to do with clothing. Those were different, she said, but the protests sounded weak even to her own ears. Were they? Kang Minho leaned against the table, arms crossed, head tilted in mock curiosity. You've been cleaning up disasters for criminals in expensive suits your entire career. The only difference between them and me is that I'm honest about what I am. The difference, Maya said, standing abruptly enough that her chair rolled back and struck the wall, is that I had a choice. I could walk away from those cases. I could refuse. Kang Minho smiled, and it was the coldest expression she'd ever witnessed on a human face. He reached into his jacket pocket and extracted a phone. Without breaking eye contact, he pressed play on an audio file. Her own voice filled the room, tinny through the speakers, but unmistakably hers. The payment will be wired to the Cayman account we discussed. Make sure the audit trail terminates at the third shell company. If anyone asks, this conversation never occurred. She remembered that call. A pharmaceutical client 4 years ago. He'd paid her $5 million to make evidence disappear. She'd told herself it was just business, that everyone in her position bent the rules, that the line between legal and illegal was so blurred it might as well not exist. The audio file ended. Silence rushed back in like water filling a drowning person's lungs. Wire fraud, Kang Minho said pleasantly. Conspiracy to obstruct justice. Destruction of evidence. Should I continue? You're blackmailing me. The words came out flat, emotionless. Shock, maybe, or the death of the last illusion she'd had about maintaining control of this situation. I'm offering you employment. He pocketed the phone. You work for me now. I purchased your partner's gambling debts 4 months ago. As of 7 this morning, he signed over his voting rights and equity to me to avoid having his legs broken, which means I own controlling interest in this firm. You'll do exactly what I tell you to do when I tell you to do it, or that recording goes to the FBI. Do you understand? Maya looked at Richard, slumped in his chair like a puppet with severed strings. He wouldn't meet her eyes. She looked at the men lining the walls, their faces blank masks that promised violence if she said the wrong thing. She looked at the photographs scattered across the table, at the evidence of what Kang Minho was capable of when someone disappointed him. I understand, she said, and felt something fundamental inside her fracture. Good. Kang Minho moved toward the door, pausing with his hand on the handle. The police are holding a press conference at noon about the warehouse fire. You have 3 hours to craft a statement from the Kang organization expressing our condolences and pledging to improve safety standards. You'll deliver it personally. Wear something that makes you look trustworthy. He looked back at her, and for just a moment, something flickered in those dark eyes. Not quite sympathy, but a recognition of shared damnation. And after that, Miss Reese, you become complicit. Welcome to the family business. The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded like a prison cell locking. Maya stood alone in the conference room, surrounded by photographs of a dead man and the wreckage of her carefully constructed life. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from Tasha. Brunch tomorrow? I'm buying. She stared at the message until the words stopped making sense, until the bright cheerfulness of it felt like a message from another universe where things like brunch and friendship still mattered. 3 hours. She had 3 hours to become an accessory to mass murder. Maya picked up the photographs, stacking them neatly, and got to work. The coffee shop Tasha had selected was aggressively trendy. Exposed brick walls, Edison bulbs hanging from copper fixtures, a chalkboard menu written in that irritating handwriting font that was supposed to look artisanal. Maya sat in the back corner booth, watching her best friend of 9 years navigate through the Saturday brunch crowd with mimosas in both hands. Tasha Young had been her roommate in graduate school, her maid of honor at the wedding that ended in divorce, the first person she'd called when her mother died. They'd built their friendship on late nights and shared secrets, on the understanding that came from being Black women trying to survive in spaces that weren't designed for them. Maya trusted her the way you trust gravity, implicitly, without question. But Tasha was nervous. Maya had known it the moment she'd walked in, the way her eyes darted toward the exit, the way she gripped her phone like a lifeline. And now, sliding into the booth across from her, Tasha's smile was too bright, too performative. I ordered us the avocado toast, Tasha said, setting down the mimosas with just slightly too much force. Liquid sloshed over the rim. And the chicken and waffles. We're celebrating, right? New chapter, new you, new something. Absolutely, Maya agreed, picking up her glass, but not drinking. She watched Tasha over the rim, cataloging details she'd missed before. The watch. Cartier, rose gold, easily $12,000. New. Tasha worked as a physical therapist. She couldn't afford that watch. The nails. Fresh acrylics, stiletto-shaped, done at a salon that charged $250 a set. The designer purse sitting on the bench beside her, still sporting the price tag tucked discreetly inside the leather. Maya's stomach dropped. That's a beautiful watch, she said casually. When did you get it? Tasha glanced down at her wrist, and something flickered across her face too quickly to identify. Oh, this? Early birthday present to myself. I've been saving. Lie. Maya had spent 12 years learning to read people, to spot the micro-expressions that betrayed deception. The way Tasha's pupils dilated slightly, the barely perceptible tightening around her mouth, the way her hand moved to cover the watch face as if concealing evidence. Expensive present, Maya observed. I work hard. I deserve nice things. Defensive now. Tasha's phone buzzed on the table, and she grabbed it immediately, angling the screen away, but not before Maya saw the name at the top. Associate. Just that. No first name, no emoji. Associate. The coffee shop suddenly felt too warm, the walls pressing in. Maya's mind raced through the past week, replaying every moment with cold analytical precision she usually reserved for client crises. The dare hadn't been Tasha's idea. Val had suggested it first, but Tasha had been the one to point out Kang Minho specifically, to insist that Maya pick the most intimidating-looking man. And afterward, when Maya had wanted to leave, Tasha had tried to convince her to stay, to have one more drink, to wait just a little longer. Tasha, Maya said softly. Are you in some kind of trouble? What? No, why would you? Another buzz. Tasha looked at the phone and her face went pale. Actually pale, the color draining so completely that Maya could see the foundation line at her jaw. Let me see your phone. Maya, that's crazy. Let me see it. Maya's voice dropped into the register she used for hostile negotiations, the tone that said this wasn't a request. Now. Tasha's hand shook as she unlocked the phone and slid it across the table. Maya picked it up, scrolled through the messages from Associate. Most were mundane. Times, dates, locations. But then. Confirmed. Target made contact. Payment transferred. She took the bait. Clean break from here. Don't contact her again unless instructed. We're watching. The date stamp on the last message was from last Saturday. The day before the dare. Maya looked up slowly. Target. Tasha's eyes were wet, mascara already beginning to run in dark rivulets down her cheeks. Maya, I swear I didn't know. I didn't understand what they wanted. Who are they? But Maya already knew. She'd known the moment she saw that watch, the moment the pieces started clicking into place with the horrible inevitability of a car crash in slow motion. I owed money, Tasha whispered. A lot of money. Gambling debt. I thought I could control it, I thought I could stop, but it got so big, Maya. And these men showed up at my apartment, and they said I had 4 days to pay or her voice broke. They said they'd kill my mother. $60,000. That's what Tasha owed. Maya knew because she'd helped her best friend refinance her apartment 3 years ago, had seen the pay stubs and bank statements. Tasha made $65,000 a year. 60,000 might as well have been 60 million. So you sold me. Maya's voice came from somewhere outside her body, detached and clinical. Shock, probably, the kind that let you function through trauma by pretending it was happening to someone else. They didn't tell me what would happen. Tasha reached across the table, but Maya pulled back like she'd been burned. They just said to bring you to Euphoria, to dare you to kiss this specific man. They said it was about business connections, that he was looking for a consultant, and this was how he vetted people. I thought it was weird, but I was desperate, and they said they'd forgive the entire debt if I just did this one thing. Did you know he was a killer? Maya asked. Did you know what he does? Tasha's silence was answer enough. Get out, Maya said. Maya, please. Get out. Maya didn't shout. She didn't need to. The words came out in a hiss of pure venom, and Tasha flinched like she'd been struck. You put a target on my back. You fed me to a monster to save yourself. We're done. If I ever see you again, I will destroy you so thoroughly that you'll wish the Kang Syndicate had just killed you instead. Tasha stood on shaking legs, clutching her purse to her chest like a shield. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. But Maya had already turned away, staring out the window at the people passing by on the sidewalk. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that their world existed right alongside another one, a darker world where friends betrayed friends and 3-second kisses carried death sentences. She heard Tasha leave, heard the bell over the door chime, heard her own heartbeat pounding in her ears like a war drum. Her phone rang. Kang Minho's name appeared on the screen and Maya almost laughed at the timing. Almost. Did you know I'd figure it out? She asked instead of hello. I was counting on it. His voice was maddeningly calm. I'm parked on the street outside. Blue Mercedes. You have 60 seconds to get in before I come in and get you. And Miss Reese, I promise you don't want me making a scene in public. Maya looked out the window. The black SUV was parked directly in front of her car, engine running. She could see Kang Minho in the driver's seat, phone pressed to his ear, watching the coffee shop entrance. Why? She asked. Why did you need me specifically? Come find out. The line went dead. Maya left $40 on the table, more than enough to cover the food that would never be eaten, and walked out into the bright Los Angeles sunshine. The day was beautiful, temperature perfect, sky impossibly blue, the kind of day that belonged in a postcard, not in the middle of a nightmare. She got into the SUV. Kang Minho didn't look at her, just pulled smoothly into traffic, navigating the Saturday crowds with the ease of someone who owned these streets. You manage accounts for the Morales cartel, he said after several blocks of silence. Not directly. You're too intelligent for that. but through shell companies and legitimate fronts. For years ago, you established their entire offshore banking structure. Impressive work, actually. It took my financial analysts 3 months to trace the connections. Maya's hands clenched in her lap. That was a legitimate client. A restaurant chain that exclusively serves as a money laundering operation. Don't insult both our intelligence by playing naive. He turned down a side street, heading away from the main roads into a neighborhood that grew progressively emptier. The Morales operation runs narcotics through my territory. We've had an understanding for years. They don't touch my businesses, I don't touch theirs. But recently, they've grown ambitious. They want Koreatown. They want the port access. They want me eliminated. And I'm what? Leverage. You're a key. You have access to their financial infrastructure, their legitimate fronts, their money flow. With you, I can bleed them dry without firing a single shot. He pulled up to a stoplight, finally turning to look at her. Your friend's debt was never about money. It was about positioning you. The debt was real, but the timing was mine. I've been waiting for an opening to bring you in without alerting the Morales cartel. When your friend got desperate, my people suggested a solution that would deliver you directly to me. I just didn't anticipate you'd be quite so audacious. Then why the performance? Maya demanded. Why buy my company? Why the blackmail? Why not just take me the night of the kiss? Kang Minho's smile was slow, predatory. Because I needed to know if you'd break or bend. Soldiers I can purchase. Partners are far more valuable. I'm not your partner. Not yet. He reached across the center console and she froze, but he only opened the glove compartment. Inside was a gun, matte black, compact, lethal. He extracted it and offered it to her, handle first. But you will be. Take it. Maya stared at the weapon. I don't. Yes, you do. I had your background investigated very thoroughly, Miss Reese. Your father was a Marine. He taught you to shoot when you were 13. You qualified expert marksman at 17. You haven't touched a gun since he died, but the training doesn't fade. He pressed the weapon into her hand, his fingers lingering against hers for just a moment. The safety is off. If you want to kill me, do it now. Shoot me, drive this vehicle to the nearest police station, tell them everything. Or put the gun in your purse and accept that we're in this together. The metal was warm from being in the glove box, heavier than she remembered. Maya wrapped her hand around the grip, muscle memory taking over, finger resting alongside the trigger guard exactly the way her father had taught her. It would be so easy. One pull, one bullet, end this nightmare before it truly began. She looked at Kang Minho, at the man who'd blackmailed her, who'd purchased her company, who'd orchestrated a friendship betrayal just to trap her. He watched her with complete calm, not a hint of fear in those dark eyes, as if he genuinely didn't care which choice she made. Or maybe he already knew. Maya put the gun in her purse. Now you understand the cost of loyalty, Kang Minho said quietly, putting the SUV back in gear. Welcome to the war, Miss Reese. Try not to die before you become useful. They drove into the descending darkness of an underground parking garage, and Maya understood with crystalline clarity that she'd just crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. The dress had been delivered to her apartment with a note in sharp masculine handwriting. Wear this. I'll collect you at 8. Maya held it up to the light, watching the fabric shimmer like oil on water. Midnight blue silk that would cling to every curve, with a slit up the thigh that bordered on obscene. The label was Italian, the stitching immaculate. Custom-made, which meant Kang Minho knew her exact measurements, which meant he'd been watching her far longer than she'd realized. She should have burned it. Should have called the police, consequences be damned. Should have run. Instead, she put it on. The dress fit like it had been painted onto her body, emphasizing the dip of her waist, the curve of her hips, the length of her legs. She'd let her natural curls free, dark spirals framing her face and spilling over bare shoulders. Makeup was minimal. A swipe of burgundy lipstick, a touch of gold shimmer at the inner corners of her eyes to make them look wider, more innocent. War paint again, but a different kind. The kind designed to distract and disarm. Kang Minho arrived at 8 precisely. She watched through the peephole as he stood in the hallway, dressed in a tuxedo that transformed him from criminal into something that could pass for legitimate. Almost. The danger still radiated from him like heat, impossible to disguise no matter how expensive the suit. She opened the door before he could knock. His eyes tracked down her body slowly, deliberately, and Maya felt that gaze like a physical touch. When he finally met her eyes again, his expression was unreadable. "You wore the dress. You didn't give me much choice." She grabbed her clutch, stepping into the hallway and locking the door behind her. "Where are we going?" "The Artemis Foundation Gala. Charity event. Very high profile." He offered his arm, and she took it because refusing would have been childish. His bicep was solid as stone beneath the fabric. "We need to be seen together publicly. It establishes you as part of my organization." "Makes me a target, you mean?" "You've been a target since the moment you kissed me. This just makes it official." They rode the elevator down in silence, emerged into the parking garage where a limousine waited. The driver opened the door without a word, and Kang Minho helped her inside with the practiced ease of someone who'd been doing this his whole life. The interior was soft leather, chilled champagne, and privacy glass. The gala was being held at the Biltmore. Old money, old power, the kind of event where politicians rubbed shoulders with CEOs and everyone pretended their money wasn't soaked in blood. Maya had attended dozens of these as a consultant, always in the background, always invisible. But tonight, walking in on Kang Minho's arm, she felt every eye in the ballroom turn to watch. The whispers started immediately. She caught fragments. "New girlfriend. Thought he didn't date. She's gorgeous. But who is she?" Kang Minho's hand settled at the small of her back, possessive and warm through the thin silk. "Smile," he murmured against her ear. "You're supposed to be enjoying yourself. I'm supposed to be covering your crimes, not playing dress-up. You're doing both." The warehouse story held beautifully, by the way. The city bought it completely. "You're very good at your job." "I'm aware." Maya accepted champagne from a passing waiter, more for something to do with her hands than any desire to drink. The ballroom was excessive even by LA standards. Crystal chandeliers the size of cars, marble floors so polished they reflected the lights like water, floor-to-ceiling towers of white roses. "How long do we have to stay?" she asked. "Until I've made my rounds. There are people here I need to see, conversations I need to have." "You're my insurance." "Your human shield, you mean." He smiled, sharp and predatory. "That too." They circulated through the crowd, Kang Minho navigating the social hierarchy with practiced ease. He introduced her as his public relations consultant. Technically true, technically legal. The men shook her hand with lingering touches and calculating eyes. The women assessed her with cold precision, evaluating competition. Maya played her part perfectly, smiling and charming and lying with every breath. She was good at this, had always been good at it. The performance of normalcy, of belonging in spaces that wanted to keep her out. But tonight felt different. Tonight she wasn't performing for clients or employers. She was performing for a man who could kill her with his bare hands and sleep soundly afterward. "Dance with me," Kang Minho said suddenly. And before she could refuse, his hand was at her waist, pulling her onto the dance floor where a live orchestra played something classical and complicated. Maya fit against him instinctively, years of cotillion classes and corporate events making her body remember the steps. His hand splayed across her lower back, fingers brushing the exposed skin above the silk. Her hand rested on his shoulder, feeling the coiled muscle beneath. They moved together like they'd done this 1,000 times, and she hated how natural it felt. "You're a good dancer," she said, because the silence was worse than talking. "My mother insisted," said a man who couldn't dance, couldn't lead. His thumb traced small circles against her spine, sending involuntary shivers up her back. She died when I was 17. Car accident. Except it wasn't an accident. Maya looked up at him, surprised by the confession. What happened? Rival gang. They wanted to send a message to my father, so they cut her brake lines and watched her drive off a cliff. His eyes were distant, focused on something she couldn't see. My father found out who gave the order. Took me with him when he went to collect. Made me watch while he took the man apart piece by piece. Then he handed me the gun and told me to finish it. How old were you? 17. Same age she was when she died. Did you do it? Kang Minho's eyes refocused on her face, and the emptiness in them made her breath catch. What do you think? A red laser dot appeared on the silk of her dress, right over her heart, bright as blood against the midnight blue fabric. Maya saw it for exactly half a second before Kang Minho yanked her sideways, spinning them with brutal efficiency. The gunshot came immediately, a sound like the world cracking open, and Kang Minho's body went rigid against hers. Warm liquid splashed across her collarbone, and she realized with detached horror that it was his blood. Chaos erupted. Screaming, bodies stampeding toward the exits. The orchestra cut off mid-note, replaced by alarms and shouting and the horrible wet sound of Kang Minho's breathing. He was pulling her toward a service door, his left arm hanging useless at his side, blood soaking through his white shirt in an expanding crimson stain. Another shot ricocheted off the marble inches from her head, and then they were through the door into a concrete service corridor that smelled like cleaning supplies and decay. Kang Minho's legs buckled. He caught himself against the wall, leaving a bloody handprint on the white paint. Run, he rasped. Out the back. My driver will. Shut up. Maya grabbed his good arm, trying to support his weight. He was massive, easily 120 pounds heavier than her, and the floor was slick with blood. His blood. So much blood. Footsteps echoed from somewhere behind them, getting closer. Maya, run. I said. Shut up. She dragged him around a corner into an alcove that held industrial laundry machines. There was a door marked electrical, no entry, and she kicked it open with her heel, maneuvering his dead weight inside. The room was cramped, filled with circuit breakers and humming machinery and decades of dust. She lowered him to the floor as gently as she could. His head lolled back against the concrete, eyes fluttering. Stubborn woman, he murmured. Says the man who got shot. Her hands were shaking as she pressed them against the wound in his shoulder, trying to slow the bleeding. The bullet had gone clean through. She could see the exit wound when she leaned him forward. Stay with me. Stay awake. Not how this works. But his hand came up to cover hers, his fingers cold and sticky with blood. The gun in my ankle holster. Take it. Kang Minho. Take the gun. The footsteps were right outside now. Slow, methodical. The assassin knew they were trapped, knew there was nowhere left to run. Maya reached down, found the small pistol strapped to Kang Minho's ankle, and pulled it free. The weight was familiar, comforting in a way that should have terrified her. She'd shot her father's guns at ranges, had punched holes in paper targets shaped like men. But paper didn't bleed. Paper didn't scream. The door opened. The man was unremarkable. Medium height, medium build, the kind of face you'd forget 5 minutes after meeting. He held a pistol with a silencer attached. Professional. Efficient. When he saw Maya standing there with Kang Minho's gun in her hand, he smiled. You should have run, sweetheart. Maya didn't think, didn't hesitate, didn't give herself time to remember that she was a consultant, not a killer. Her body remembered the training. Feet shoulder-width apart, arms extended, front sight focus. Her fingers squeezed the trigger. Once. Twice. Both shots hit center mass, exactly where her father had taught her to aim. The assassin's eyes widened in surprise, then nothing. He dropped like someone had cut his strings, the gun clattering from his hand to spin across the floor. Silence rushed back in. Maya stood frozen, the gun still raised, watching the man's chest for movement that would never come. Behind her, she heard Kang Minho's breathing, ragged but steady. Alive. Good shot, he said, and there was something in his voice that hadn't been there before. Respect, maybe. Or recognition. Maya lowered the gun slowly. Her hands weren't shaking anymore. She felt calm, clear, like she'd just solved a particularly complex crisis for a client instead of ending a human life. That should have horrified her. Instead, it felt inevitable. She turned back to Kang Minho, who was watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Can you walk? Not certain yet. He tried to stand, made it halfway before his legs gave out again. Maya caught him, taking most of his weight, and together they stumbled toward the door. Behind them, the assassin's body cooled on the concrete floor, and Maya didn't look back. They made it to the service exit, made it to the limousine where the driver took one look at them and floored it without asking questions. Made it to somewhere dark and quiet where Kang Minho slumped against her, his blood soaking into the midnight silk of her dress, his breath warm against her neck. You didn't run, he said. No. Why? Maya looked down at the gun still clutched in her hand, at the man bleeding out against her shoulder, at the reflection in the window showing a woman she barely recognized. I don't know, she whispered. But that was a lie. She knew exactly why. The safe house was unremarkable from the outside, a small craftsman bungalow in Silver Lake that could have belonged to any young professional trying to survive LA's housing market. Inside, however, the illusion shattered immediately. Steel-reinforced door, security cameras hidden in smoke detectors, windows with bulletproof glass, and a medical kit in the bathroom that would have been at home in a field hospital. Maya had stripped Kang Minho's shirt off with clinical efficiency, her hands steady despite the adrenaline crash she could feel hovering at the edges of her consciousness. The shoulder wound was bad but survivable. The bullet had missed the major arteries, passed clean through muscle and tissue without fragmenting. Lucky. Or maybe Kang Minho was just too stubborn to die. He sat on the edge of the bathtub while she worked, his torso a map of violence. Old scars crisscrossed his chest and back. Knife wounds, bullet wounds, burns that looked deliberately inflicted. The tattoos she'd glimpsed at the club covered more of him than she'd realized. Intricate patterns flowing from his neck down both arms and across his ribs. Dragons and demons and Korean script she couldn't read, all rendered in black and gray with the kind of precision that came from master artists. You're staring, he said, his voice rough with pain. You're interesting to look at. She threaded the needle she'd sterilized, not bothering with anesthetic. He hadn't asked for any, and she suspected offering would have insulted him. This is going to hurt. Good. I like knowing I'm still alive. The first stitch went through cleanly. Kang Minho didn't flinch, didn't make a sound, just watched her work with those dark, unreadable eyes. Maya focused on the task, letting the familiar rhythm of crisis management take over. Assess, strategize, execute. She'd sutured wounds before. Her father had insisted she learn basic field medicine, said you never knew when the skill might save your life. She wondered if he'd known how right he'd be. Where did you learn to shoot like that? Kang Minho asked after she'd finished the first few stitches. My father. He taught me everything. Shooting, field medicine, hand-to-hand combat. Said the world was too dangerous for his daughter to be helpless. Smart man. Dead man. Killed in action overseas when I was 23. The words came out flat, practiced. She'd told the story so many times it had lost all meaning. I scattered his ashes in the Pacific like he wanted. Joined the business world instead of following him into the military. Thought I could make a difference without getting my hands dirty. How's that working out for you? Maya tied off another stitch with more force than necessary. I killed a man tonight. Yes, you did. I killed him, and I don't feel bad about it. She finally looked up from the wound, meeting his eyes. What does that make me? Alive. Which is more than he is. Kang Minho reached up with his good hand, his fingers grazing her cheek, so gently it sent shivers down her spine. "You're not going to break, are you?" "I don't know what I'm going to do." But she didn't pull away from his touch, didn't stop her own hand from trembling slightly as she placed another stitch. The bathroom was too small, too warm. She could smell his blood, his sweat, the cedar and smoke scent of him beneath it all. "I should turn you in," she said quietly. "I should take that recording you have of me and go to the police anyway. Take my chances with the legal system." "But you won't." "No," she admitted. "I won't." "Why?" "Because I'm already complicit. Because I've spent 12 years cleaning up crimes for people who could afford my services. Because maybe you're right. Maybe the only difference between them and you is that you're honest about what you are." She finished the last stitch, cut the thread, and sat back on her heels. "Or maybe I'm just a coward who doesn't want to go to prison. You saved my life tonight. That's not cowardice. I also took one. That's not heroism either." Kang Minho was quiet for a long moment, his hand still resting against her face, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw, and she felt her pulse kick up in response, her body betraying her even as her mind screamed that this was wrong, dangerous, insane. "Come here," he said softly. "I'm right here." "Closer." Maya stood, and he pulled her between his legs, his good arm wrapping around her waist. She should have resisted, should have maintained the professional distance she'd been so carefully cultivating. But his blood was on her hands, on her dress. His life was still warm under her fingertips. And when he looked up at her with those dark eyes full of something she couldn't name, she found herself moving without deciding to. She touched his face, her fingers tracing the strong line of his jaw, the sharp cheekbones, the small scar above his left eyebrow. His skin was warm despite the blood loss, his heartbeat steady beneath her palm when she pressed her hand against his chest. "You're not going to break," he said again, but this time it wasn't a question. It was a recognition, an acknowledgement of something he'd seen in her the moment she'd kissed him at the club. "No," Maya agreed. "I'm going to bend." And that's so much worse. She kissed him before she could change her mind. It wasn't like the dare, wasn't brief or innocent or playful. This was something else entirely, something hungry and desperate and laced with the bitter taste of inevitability. His good arm tightened around her waist, pulling her fully against him, and she could feel the heat of his body through the ruined silk dress. His mouth moved against hers with a hunger that matched her own, and when his tongue swept across her lower lip, she opened for him without hesitation. His hand slid up her spine, tangling in her curls, tilting her head back so he could deepen the kiss. She felt the sharp edge of his teeth, tasted copper and whiskey and something uniquely him. Her own hands were everywhere, his neck, his shoulders, careful of the wound, mapping the landscape of muscle and scar tissue and ink. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Maya's lipstick was smeared across his mouth like evidence of a crime. "This is a terrible idea," she whispered against his lips. "The worst," he agreed, and pulled her back in. They moved to the bed, the only furniture in the safe house beyond the bathroom fixtures and a table in the kitchen. Kang Minho was weakened by blood loss, his movements slower than they should have been, but his hands were steady as they found the zipper of her dress. The silk pulled at her feet, and she stood before him in nothing but black lace that left very little to imagination. His eyes tracked over her body with the same intensity he'd used at the gala, but this time there was no pretense of propriety. This was pure want, raw and honest and terrifying in its implications. "We shouldn't," Maya said, even as she reached for his belt. "No," Kang Minho agreed, helping her with the buckle. "We absolutely shouldn't." But they did anyway. She was careful of his shoulder, conscious of the fresh stitches that could tear open. He was careful of her in different ways, reverent almost, his hands and mouth exploring her body like he was memorizing something precious. They came together with the desperation of people who'd stared down death and survived, who'd crossed lines they couldn't uncross and decided to keep walking anyway. Afterward, they lay tangled in sheets that smelled like blood and sex and the end of the world as Maya had known it. Kang Minho's good arm was wrapped around her waist, holding her against his chest, and she could feel his heartbeat, steady and strong beneath her ear. "This doesn't change anything," she said into the darkness. "No," he agreed. "It changes everything. I still hate you." "Good. That makes this honest." Maya's phone buzzed on the nightstand. She'd forgotten she even had it. She reached for it with heavy limbs, expecting Tasha or Val or someone from the office. Instead, it was an unknown number. A video file. She almost didn't open it, almost deleted it without watching, but something made her thumb press play. And then she was watching grainy security footage from the gala. The angle was from above, showing the dance floor in black and white, showing the red laser dot that had hovered center mass on her chest, showing the split second before he'd moved, showing him spin them so his body took the bullet instead of hers. Maya's breath caught. She watched it 3 more times, each viewing making it clearer. The bullet had been aimed at her. Not Kang Minho. Her. He'd saved her life. "You knew," she whispered, turning to look at him. "You saw the laser sight and you knew the bullet was meant for me, and you took it anyway." Kang Minho's expression didn't change. "Yes." "Why?" "Because you're mine now. And I protect what's mine. I'm not yours. Lie to yourself if it helps you sleep, but don't lie to me." He pulled her closer despite the pain it must have caused his shoulder. "Someone wanted you dead tonight, Maya. Someone who knew you'd be there with me, who had access to the guest list and the security schedule. Which means someone in my organization is leaking information." The warmth she'd felt from their intimacy evaporated instantly, replaced by ice-cold clarity. "A mole. A mole who wants both of us dead." He grabbed his phone from the nightstand, pulled up a document, and handed it to her. Maya scanned the information, her analytical mind processing the data with mechanical efficiency. "4 people had access to your schedule tonight. 2 guards, 1 lieutenant, and your brother." "Run it again." Kang Minho's voice was flat. "It's not Minjae. Check everyone else first. Look at the data." She turned the screen toward him. Kang Minho pushed the tablet away, his eyes cold. "Run it again." "It's impossible." But Maya was already pulling up financial records, encrypted communications, security footage from the past 4 months. The pattern was there, undeniable once you knew where to look. Every time they'd been hit, every time shipments had been intercepted, every time information had leaked, Kang Minjae was one of the people with access. She scrolled through the evidence, her analytical mind cataloging the connections despite her instinctive rejection. The transfers to offshore accounts, the deleted communications, the subtle inconsistencies in his alibis. It was circumstantial, but damning. "He's your brother," she said quietly. "Your only family. Which is why I've been blind to it." Kang Minho's voice was completely flat, emotionless in the way that suggested he was feeling too much to express. "He's the only person I trusted absolutely. The only person I thought was beyond corruption. You could be wrong. This could be. I'm not wrong, and you know it." He took the phone back, his jaw tight. "Find me proof. Absolute, incontrovertible proof that I can't deny or rationalize away. You're a fixer. You know how to dig through digital footprints. Prove it's him." "And if I do?" Kang Minho didn't answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice was so quiet she almost didn't hear him. "Then I'll do what needs to be done. Because that's what kings do." Maya lay back down beside him, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of what he'd just asked her to do settle on her chest like a stone. He wanted her to find proof that his brother had betrayed him. Wanted her to hand him evidence that would end in Minji's death. Wanted her to be the one to pull the trigger, metaphorically if not literally. "I saved your life tonight," she said. "Yes." "You saved mine." "Yes." "So we're even." "No," Kang Minho said, his arm tightening around her waist. "We're just getting started." Maya had always been good with computers, a skill learned out of necessity in an industry that ran on digital trails and buried evidence. But Kang Minho's security protocols were impressive. Military-grade encryption, rotating passwords, biometric locks on his devices. He was either incredibly paranoid or incredibly guilty. Probably both. She'd commandeered a corner of Kang Minho's main office, a building in Koreatown that officially housed an import-export company and unofficially served as the nerve center of the Kang syndicate. 3 monitors surrounded her, each displaying different data streams. Financial transactions, communication logs, surveillance footage. Kang Minho's tech specialist, a nervous kid named Jean, did the heavy lifting on the encryption, but Maya was the one connecting the dots. She directed him where to look, translating the raw data he mined into a narrative of betrayal. She'd been at it for 20 hours straight, fueled by coffee and the sick feeling in her stomach that came from hunting evidence against a man whose only crime might be sharing DNA with a monster. Kang Minho hadn't left the building either, though he'd stayed out of her workspace, giving her room to work, or maybe giving himself distance from what she might find. His shoulder was healing, the stitches holding, the bleeding stopped, but she could see the strain in the way he moved, the careful precision that suggested pain just beneath the surface. Her phone buzzed. An unknown number, but the area code was familiar. DC, Federal. She almost didn't answer, almost let it go to voicemail, but 20 hours of staring at financial records had fried her decision-making capabilities. So she picked up. "Hello, Maya." The voice was familiar in a way that made her stomach turn. "It's been a while." Marcus. Her ex-husband. FBI Special Agent Marcus Wright, who'd served her divorce papers 3 years ago with a smile and a promise that he'd never speak to her again. "How did you get this number?" she asked, her voice flat. "I'm FBI, Maya. I can get any number I want." He sounded exactly the same. Smooth, confident, the kind of voice that had convinced her to marry him 9 years ago. "I heard you've been keeping interesting company lately." Kang Minho. "That's a dangerous man to be associated with." "I'm his consultant." "It's a professional relationship." "Is that what you call sleeping with him?" Marcus let that hang in the air for a moment. "We have surveillance footage from the safe house in Silver Lake." "Want me to describe what I saw?" Maya's blood went cold. "That's illegal surveillance." "Necessary surveillance." Kang is the target of a major federal investigation. Anyone in his orbit is fair game. A pause. "I'm worried about you, Maya. This man is a killer. He's dangerous. Let me help you." "I don't need your help." "Yes, you do. Meet me tomorrow. Silver Lake Reservoir, the south entrance. 3 p.m. Come alone." His voice softened, taking on the intimate tone he'd used when they were married. "I still care about you. I don't want to see you go down with him." The line went dead before she could respond. Maya sat staring at her phone, her mind racing. Marcus wanted to meet. Marcus, who'd walked away from their marriage claiming he couldn't be with someone who compromised their ethics for money. Marcus, who'd made her feel small and dirty for the work she did. Marcus, who was suddenly very interested in her relationship with Kang Minho. Something was wrong. Federal agents didn't reach out to potential witnesses like this. They subpoenaed them, brought them in for formal questioning. They didn't make clandestine phone calls with promises of help. She looked back at her monitors, at the evidence she'd been compiling on Minho. Then she opened a new search window and typed in a name. Marcus Wright. 40 minutes later, she walked into Kang Minho's private office without knocking. He was standing at the window overlooking Koreatown, a glass of whiskey in his hand, watching the city lights like they held answers to questions he didn't want to ask. "I need to tell you something," she said. He turned, and his eyes tracked over her face with that unsettling intensity. "You found something?" "Yes, but not what you expected." She pulled up her phone, showing him the financial records she'd uncovered. Marcus Wright. My ex-husband. FBI Special Agent. also apparently on the Morales cartel's payroll. Kang Minho took the phone, scrolling through the evidence. Explain. He's been moving money for them for 4 years, using his position to provide cover, to run interference with federal investigations. He's not trying to take you down because you're a criminal. He's trying to take you down because you're competition. She pulled up more files. The Morales operation wants Koreatown. Marcus is the one helping them get it. And he just called me, asking to meet tomorrow. Alone. Alone. Kang Minho's expression didn't change, but she saw his hand tighten around the whiskey glass. He wants the encryption keys. The ones you created for the Morales offshore accounts. How did you? Because it's what I would do. You have access to their entire financial infrastructure. With those keys, he could drain their accounts, make it look like you did it, and eliminate both his bosses and his competition in one move. He drained the whiskey, set the glass down with careful control. You're not going to that meeting. Yes, I am. Maya. He's dirty. You know it, I know it. But I need proof I can use, the kind that holds up in court, not just in the criminal underworld. She crossed her arms, meeting his gaze. I go to the meeting. I get him talking. Your people record everything. Then we have evidence that a federal agent is working with the cartel, and we can use that to what? Turn him into his fellow agents? Half of them are probably on the take too. Kang Minho moved closer, his presence filling the space between them. You walk into that meeting, you might not walk out. Then make sure your surveillance team is excellent. This isn't your fight. Yes, it is. She held his gaze. He used me. Used our marriage. He knew what I did for work, knew the clients I managed, and he married me to get access. The realization settled over her like a heavy coat, suffocating and inescapable. I was never his wife. I was always his mark. Kang Minho studied her for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone, made a call in rapid Korean, and hung up. Fine. But you wear a wire. You carry a weapon. And the second things go wrong, my people extract you by any means necessary. Agreed. And Maya, he cupped her face in his hand, his thumb tracing her lower lip. If he touches you, I will burn down everything he's ever loved and make him watch before I kill him. Are we clear? She should have been terrified of the cold promise in his voice. Instead, she felt something warm unfurl in her chest, dangerous and addictive. Crystal. Good. He kissed her, hard and possessive, before stepping back. Now show me what you found on my brother. Maya returned to her monitors, pulling up the evidence she'd compiled over 20 hours. The leak started 7 months ago. Small things at first. Intercepted shipments, compromised safe houses. Then it escalated. The pattern matches Minji's access to secure information. That's not proof. That's correlation. I know. So I went deeper. She pulled up a series of encrypted messages recovered from a deleted email account. These are communications between someone using the alias Crown Prince and a Morales lieutenant. They're discussing your operations in detail. Security protocols, shipment schedules, personnel files. Kang Minho leaned over her shoulder, reading the messages, his jaw tight, his shoulders rigid. Anyone could have created that alias. Agreed. Except for this. She pulled up metadata from one of the messages. The email was sent from a device that pinged off a cell tower near Minji's apartment at 3:15 in the morning. On a night when he told you he was out of town. Silence. Heavy and terrible. It's circumstantial, Kang Minho said finally. It's a pattern. And there's more. Maya pulled up bank records. Minji has been making deposits to an offshore account. Small amounts, easy to miss, but they add up to just over 3 million in the past 7 months. Where's the money coming from? I don't know yet. The trail goes cold at a shell company in the Caymans, but I'll find it. She turned in her chair, looking up at him. You asked for proof. I'm getting you proof. But Minho, you need to prepare yourself for what I'm going to find. He didn't respond, just stared at the monitors like they were showing him footage of his own execution. "He's your brother," Maya said softly. "If you want me to stop." "No. Keep digging." His voice was completely flat. "I need to know. Whatever the cost." She worked through the night, tracing the money, following the digital breadcrumbs Min-jae had tried to erase. Kang Minho stayed with her, pacing the office, drinking whiskey with mechanical precision, his face a mask that revealed nothing. By dawn, she had it. The smoking gun. The absolute proof. "The money is coming from the Morales cartel," she said, her voice hoarse from hours of not speaking. "They've been paying Min-jae $250,000 a month to feed them information. They want to take over your territory, and he's helping them do it." Kang Minho stood at the window, backlit by the rising sun, his silhouette perfectly still. "Why? I don't know yet." "Find out." So she kept digging, pushing past exhaustion, past the ethics that should have made her stop. And finally, buried in encrypted communications, she found it. A message from Min-jae to the Morales lieutenant. "He's my brother, but he's also the man who killed our father. I don't care about the money. I want to watch him bleed." Maya's hands shook as she pulled up the message for Kang Minho. "He blames you for your father's death. My father died 6 years ago. Heart attack. That's what the death certificate says. But Min-jae believes differently." She found the attachment, a coroner's report that had been sealed, marked confidential. "He thinks you poisoned him. That you wanted control of the organization and killed your father to get it." Kang Minho read the report in silence. When he finished, he carefully set the phone down on the desk. "I didn't kill my father." "I know. How do you know?" "Because if you had, you wouldn't need me to prove your brother's guilt. You'd just kill him and move on." She stood, crossing to where he stood at the window. "But you don't want to believe he betrayed you. You want me to be wrong." "Yes," he admitted quietly. "I do. I'm not wrong." "No, you're not." They stood together, watching the sun climb higher over Los Angeles, and Maya wondered if this was what damnation felt like. Not fire and brimstone, but the slow realization that everyone you trusted was a liar, and the only honest thing in your life was the monster who'd bought your company and blackmailed you into compliance. "I'm meeting Marcus tomorrow," she said. "After that, we deal with Min-jae." After that, Kang Minho agreed, "We go to war." The press conference was Maya's idea. After the gala shooting, Kang Minho's reputation had taken a hit. The media was circling, asking questions about security failures and rumors of gang violence. They needed a show of strength, a demonstration that the Kang organization was legitimate, professional, untouchable. So Maya had arranged everything. The venue at the Four Seasons, the media list carefully curated to include sympathetic outlets, the talking points designed to project confidence without admitting guilt. Kang Minho would announce a major charitable initiative, a community center in Koreatown. $60 million invested in youth programs and small business development. He would look like a pillar of the community, not a crime lord. And Maya would stand beside him, the polished professional who'd transformed his image from dangerous to respectable. She'd spent the morning in preparation, choosing her outfit with calculated precision. A cream suit that photographed well under camera lights, minimal jewelry, hair pulled back in a professional bun. She looked competent, trustworthy, like someone who'd never killed a man in a service corridor or slept with her criminal employer. The press room was packed. Journalists crowded the space, cameras set up in rows, the energy electric with anticipation. Maya stood backstage with Kang Minho, doing final run-throughs of his talking points, making sure he knew which questions to deflect and which to answer. "You're good at this," he said, adjusting his tie in the mirror. "It's what you pay me for." "Is it?" He turned to face her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "What we are, Maya. It's not just business anymore." "Yes, it is. That's all it can be. Lie to yourself if it helps, but don't lie to me." "I know." She straightened his collar, her fingers lingering against the fabric. After this, we deal with Minjae. And then we figure out what comes next. The stage manager gave them a 5-minute warning. Maya took one last look at Kang Minho. Powerful, composed, every inch the legitimate businessman, and felt something twist in her chest that might have been pride or might have been grief for the person she used to be. They walked on stage together. The camera flashes were blinding, the noise deafening. Maya took her place slightly behind and to the left of the podium, the position that said advisor without demanding attention. Kang Minho approached the microphone, and the room quieted. "Good afternoon," he began, his voice steady and authoritative. "Thank you all for coming. I know there have been questions following the incident at the Artemis Foundation Gala, and I want to address those concerns directly." Maya watched the journalists, reading their body language, identifying the friendly faces and the hostile ones. Everything was going according to plan. Kang Minho was hitting his marks, staying on message, projecting exactly the image they'd crafted. And then he went off script. "But before I discuss the charitable initiative, I need to address a personnel matter." He turned, looking directly at Maya. "Miss Reese, would you please step forward?" Confusion flickered across her face, but she moved to the podium anyway, maintaining her professional mask. "Yes, I'm terminating your employment with the Kang organization, effective immediately." The room erupted. Journalists shouted questions, camera flashes intensified. Maya stood frozen, not understanding, waiting for the punchline that didn't come. "Miss Reese has been under investigation for embezzlement," Kang Minho continued, his voice cutting through the chaos. "We discovered that she has been systematically stealing from our organization for the past 4 months. The total amount exceeds $3 million. "That's not true," Maya said, her voice barely audible over the noise. "Security has already seized your accounts and your passport. The evidence has been turned over to the police." His eyes were flat, emotionless. "You used your position of trust to betray this organization. You're nothing but a con artist with a degree who thought she could sleep her way to the top and steal from us in the process." The words hit like physical blows. Maya felt her face go hot, felt tears prick at her eyes even as her brain screamed that this couldn't be real, couldn't be happening. She looked at Kang Minho, at the man she'd saved, who'd saved her, who'd held her while she slept, and saw nothing but cold calculation. "Security," he said, and 2 large men appeared from backstage. "Please escort Miss Reese from the building." They grabbed her arms, and she didn't resist. Couldn't resist. The room was spinning, voices blurring together, camera flashes making everything surreal and nightmarish. They dragged her through the side exit, past the loading dock, and dumped her on the sidewalk like trash. The doors slammed shut, the lock engaged. Maya stood alone on the street in her cream suit, and the sky decided that was the perfect moment to open up. Rain came down in sheets, soaking through her clothes in seconds, washing away the careful makeup she'd applied. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Get somewhere safe. Now." No apology, no explanation, just a geolocation tag and a command. Melanie stared at the screen, rain dripping from her nose. The humiliation was real, but the discard, that was strategy. And finally, "I'm sorry, but this was the only way." Maya's hands shook as she read the messages. Understanding came slowly, like a key turning in a lock that had rusted shut. This was a performance. A play to make Marcus think she was worthless, that the encryption keys were worthless, that there was no reason to target her anymore. But the knowledge didn't stop the humiliation from burning through her veins. Didn't stop the image of Kang Minho calling her a con artist from repeating in her mind on an endless loop. Didn't stop the tears that mixed with the rain and tasted like salt and betrayal. She walked to the nearest coffee shop, sat in the back corner, ordered nothing. Her phone buzzed continuously. Journalists calling for comment, former clients rescinding contracts, the professional life she'd built crumbling in real time. She watched it happen with numb detachment, like observing a car crash in slow motion. An hour passed, then another. The rain stopped, but she stayed soaked, shivering in the air conditioning. Her phone rang. Marcus. I saw the press conference, he said without preamble. Jesus, Maya, are you okay? No. Her voice sounded foreign to her own ears, small and broken. Meet me right now. I have contacts who can help. We can fix this. Where? The Warehouse District. Port of Los Angeles. I'll text you the address. His voice was warm, concerned. Everything Kang Minho's had been cold. You don't have to go through this alone. The line went dead. A moment later, the address came through. And beneath it, in a different text thread, another message from Kang Minho. He's moving faster than we expected. Surveillance team is in position. You're not alone. Maya stood on legs that felt like water, left $60 on the table for the coffee she never ordered, and walked out into the overcast afternoon. She was going to confront her ex-husband. She was going to get him talking. She was going to bring down a corrupt federal agent and cripple the Morales cartel's operations. And maybe, just maybe, she was going to prove to herself that what Kang Minho had done on that stage was strategy, not truth. That she was more than what he'd called her. That she hadn't fallen in love with a man who saw her as nothing but a useful tool. The Warehouse District loomed ahead, all rusted metal and broken windows. She walked toward it like she was walking toward her own execution. And in a way, maybe she was. The warehouse Marcus had chosen was exactly the kind of place people died in crime novels. Isolated, abandoned, with security cameras that had stopped working years ago. Maya approached it with her chin up and her hands empty, playing the role of broken woman seeking rescue. The wire Kang Minho's team had fitted her with was sewn into the lining of her jacket, undetectable unless someone strip-searched her. The panic button was disguised as an earring. The gun was strapped to her inner thigh, small and cold against her skin. She was walking into a trap, but she was also setting one. Marcus was waiting inside, leaning against a desk that looked like it had survived the apocalypse. He looked exactly the same as he had 3 years ago when he'd served her divorce papers. Tall, conventionally handsome, with that easy confidence that came from never having to question his place in the world. White, privileged, and utterly convinced of his own righteousness. He'd always seen her as less than, she realized now. A trophy wife with useful skills, someone to show off at bureau functions while quietly resenting her success. Maya, he said, pushing off the desk and approaching with open arms like they were old friends instead of exes who'd torn each other apart. I'm so glad you came. I was worried you'd. Cut the bullshit, Marcus. She stayed out of reach, her voice sharp enough to draw blood. I know what you are. I know who you work for. So let's skip the concerned ex-husband routine and get to the part where you tell me what you want. He stopped, and something shifted in his expression. The warmth bled out, replaced by calculation. You always were too smart for your own good. The encryption keys. That's what this is about, isn't it? You want access to the Morales cartel's offshore accounts. I want a lot of things. He circled her slowly, predatory. But yes, the keys are the priority. You created that system, Maya. You're the only person who can access it without triggering the security protocols. And you think I'll just hand them over? After you ruined my reputation on national television. Marcus smiled. I think you'll do it to stay alive. And because I'm offering you something Kang Minho never will. What's that? Freedom. He pulled out his phone, showed her a series of documents. New identity, offshore accounts in her name, a fresh start in a country without extradition treaties. You give me the keys, you walk away from all of this. Clean break. New life. Maya looked at the documents, at the promise of escape, and felt nothing but contempt. You really think I'm that stupid? I think you're that desperate. He pocketed the phone. The Morales operation wants you dead, Maya. You know too much. You've seen too much. The only reason you're still alive is because they think you might be useful. Prove you're not, and they'll gut you like a fish. And what about you? You're FBI. Aren't you supposed to protect people, not threaten them? I protect people who deserve protection. You've been enabling criminals for a decade. You're as dirty as they are. He moved closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, the same expensive brand he'd worn when they were married. Give me the keys and I'll make sure you live through this. Refuse and I'll let nature take its course. Maya's mind raced, calculating angles. Kang Minho's surveillance team was listening to every word. They had Marcus on tape now, admitting to extortion, admitting to working with the cartel. But she needed more. Needed him to give up names, locations, the full scope of the FBI corruption. I don't have the keys, she lied. They're encrypted separately. I'd need access to the original servers to retrieve them. Then get access. I can't. Kang Minho fired me, remember? I don't have security clearance anymore. Marcus studied her, and she could see him weighing her words, deciding if she was telling the truth. Then I guess you're not as useful as I thought. He pulled a gun from his waistband, standard FBI issue, which somehow made it worse, and pressed it against her temple. The metal was cold, impersonal. Maya's heart kicked into overdrive, but she forced herself to stay calm, to breathe through the terror. Last chance, Marcus, she said. The keys. Now. They're in my apartment. A USB drive hidden in the bookshelf. Second shelf, behind the Toni Morrison novels. Another lie, but delivered with enough specificity to sound convincing. Marcus's finger relaxed slightly on the trigger. See? That wasn't so hard. He pulled out his phone, made a call in rapid Spanish. Maya caught fragments. Apartment. USB. Secure it. While he was distracted, she turned slightly, catching the eye of one of the guards by the door. She gave an almost imperceptible nod toward Marcus. He's going down, she whispered. Let me at that terminal for 30 seconds, and I'll transfer $5 million to you right now. The guard hesitated, greed warring with loyalty. Greed won. He stepped aside. Maya didn't transfer money. She initiated a system-wide financial lockout that would alert Kang Minho's team to the IP address immediately. They're sending someone to retrieve the drive, Marcus said, pocketing his phone. We're going to wait here until they confirm. If you lied to me, I'll know. He pressed the gun harder against her skull. And if you lied, I'll paint these walls with your brain matter. Romantic as ever. Shut up. They waited in tense silence. 5 minutes. 10. Maya counted her breaths, staying centered, staying ready. The gun at her thigh was a comforting weight, but she couldn't reach it while Marcus held her at gunpoint. She needed an opening. Needed him to make a mistake. His phone rang. He answered in Spanish, listened, and his face went dark. What do you mean there's nothing there? Maya smiled. I lied. You stupid. She moved before he could finish, dropping her weight and twisting out from under the gun. The shot went wide, punching through the ceiling and sending concrete dust raining down. Maya's hand was already moving, reaching for the weapon strapped to her thigh, pulling it free with practiced ease. They faced each other across 3 feet of empty warehouse space, both armed, both perfectly still. You can't shoot a federal agent, Marcus said. That's life in prison. Not if that federal agent is dirty. Not if I have proof of your corruption. Not if you're about to kill me in an abandoned crime scene. She kept the gun steady, exactly the way her father had taught her. Drop your weapon, Marcus. It's over. The hell it is. The warehouse door crashed open. Men poured in, not Kang Minho's team, but Morales soldiers, armed and efficient. They fanned out, surrounding them both. And Maya realized with sinking dread that Marcus had been stalling, waiting for backup. Drop your weapon, Marcus said again, and this time there was triumph in his voice. You're outnumbered, outgunned, and out of options. Maya looked at the 12 men with automatic rifles pointed at her head, at her ex-husband with his smug smile, at the situation that had gone from bad to catastrophic. And she started laughing. Something funny? Marcus asked. You still don't get it. She lowered her gun slowly, carefully, and set it on the floor. I didn't come here to escape. I came here to stall. Stall for what? For this. The lights went out. Emergency generators kicked in after 3 seconds, but those 3 seconds were enough. Maya dropped, rolled, came up behind a support pillar as gunfire erupted from the warehouse rafters. Kang Minho's team, positioned before she'd even arrived, opened fire with surgical precision. The Morales soldiers went down one by one, professional and efficient. Marcus ran for the back exit, but stopped dead. Standing in the doorway, gun raised, was Kang Minho. But he wasn't aiming at Marcus. He was aiming at Maya. You shouldn't have dug so deep, Minho said, his finger tightening on the trigger. Kang Minho stepped out of the shadows, his own gun leveled at his brother's head. Drop it, Minho. Or I drop you. The two brothers faced each other across the warehouse, weapons drawn, years of love and betrayal hanging between them like smoke. Hello, brother, Minho said, not lowering his weapon. Surprised to see me? Not really. Maya found the evidence. I've known for days. And yet you did nothing. Still hoping I'd prove her wrong. Something like that. Minji's eyes flicked to Maya, still crouched behind the pillar. She made you weak. That woman. She's turned you soft. No, Kang Minho said quietly, his gaze never leaving his brother. She made me a king. He pulled the trigger. The shot was surgical, passing inches from Maya's position and striking Minji's hand. The gun clattered to the floor. Minjo stumbled back, clutching his ruined hand, shock written across his face. You shot me, he gasped. You actually shot me. You betrayed me. You sided with our enemies. You tried to destroy everything Father built. Kang Minho's voice was flat, emotionless. Did you think there wouldn't be consequences? I'm your brother. Past tense. Kang Minho stepped forward, aiming the gun at Minji's head. I loved you. Protected you. Gave you everything. And you repaid me with treachery. Minho, wait, Maya said, emerging from behind the pillar. Don't, Kang Minho said, his voice cold. He didn't look away from his brother. This is family business. Maya watched from across the warehouse as Kang Minho looked at his younger brother, the last blood relative he had in the world, and made his choice. The gunshot echoed through the port. Seagulls scattered into the gray sky, and Kang Minho fell to the floor of the warehouse, a neat hole between his eyes, gone before he hit the ground. Kang Minho stood over the body for a long moment. Then he turned to Marcus, still zip-tied to a chair and staring in wide-eyed horror. The files on you specifically are being transferred to the Department of Justice as we speak, Kang Minho said, pulling out his phone. The director has agreed to sacrifice you to save herself. You'll be the lone wolf, the scapegoat. You'll spend the rest of your life in federal prison if you're lucky. You son of a bitch, Marcus spat. You can't. I already did. Consider it a gift from my associate. Kang Minho holstered his gun and finally turned to Maya. He walked to her, offering a hand to help her up. She took it, her fingers trembling slightly, but when he pulled her to her feet, she didn't let go. They walked out of the warehouse together, leaving the bodies and the betrayal behind them. Outside, the first light of dawn was breaking over the port. The battlefield had gone quiet, the surviving cartel soldiers either dead or fled. Kang Minho's forces were securing the area, stacking bodies, erasing evidence. By noon, the official story would be a joint FBI private security raid on a domestic terror cell gone wrong. Heroic, tragic, and completely fabricated. No one would ever know the truth. He looked at her, and his eyes were hollow, empty in a way she'd never seen before. I killed my brother, he said. I know. Does that change things? No. She took his hand, lacing their fingers together, blood-stained and gunpowder-scented and perfect in its honesty. We're past the point of redemption. Both of us. Are you saying you're staying? I'm saying I don't have anywhere else to go. You destroyed my reputation, remember? Made me unemployable. Froze my assets. She smiled without humor. You made sure the only place I could survive was by your side. I'm a monster. So am I. She pulled him closer, her other hand cupping his face. We can be monsters together. He kissed her there in the dawn light, surrounded by the evidence of their violence, and it tasted like victory and damnation in equal measure. 6 months later, they returned to Euphoria. The club had been renovated. New owners, new staff, all of them on the Kang Syndicate's payroll. The VIP section where Maya had taken that fateful dare was now permanently blocked off, reserved for Kang Minho and his inner circle. A throne room in a kingdom of vice. Maya sat between Kang Minho's legs on the velvet banquette, wearing a dress that cost more than her old apartment and a diamond necklace worth more than the club itself. Her natural curls fell free over bare shoulders, and her makeup was dramatic. Gold shimmer and dark lips, and the kind of confidence that came from knowing you were untouchable. The Kang organization had expanded in the past 6 months. With the Morales cartel crippled and the FBI neutralized, they'd absorbed territory like a spreading infection. Koreatown, the port, half of downtown LA. Kang Minho wasn't just a crime lord anymore. He was a king, and everyone knew it. And Maya was his queen. She'd transformed the organization's operations, legitimizing their business fronts, creating shell companies and charitable foundations that laundered money so efficiently the IRS couldn't touch them. She'd turned the Kang Syndicate into a corporate empire indistinguishable from any other Fortune 500 company. Except theirs had significantly better profit margins and absolutely no oversight. Remember this place? Kang Minho murmured against her ear, his hand tracing patterns on her bare thigh. Where you walked up to me like you owned the world? I was drunk and stupid. You were magnificent. His lips brushed her temple. Still are. Flattery doesn't work on me anymore. Doesn't it? His hand slid higher, and she felt heat bloom low in her belly. I seem to recall it working quite well this morning. That wasn't flattery. That was bribery. Is there a difference? Maya laughed, genuine and unguarded, and turned to kiss him properly. The club around them continued its nightly business. Deals being made, loyalties being tested, the machinery of organized crime grinding along smoothly. But in their corner, in their throne room, it was just the two of them. I dare you to kiss me, Kang Minho said, echoing that first night. No. Maya smiled, predatory and perfect. I don't do dares anymore. I give orders. She kissed him anyway. And it tasted like copper and expensive whiskey and the future they'd carved out with blood and bullets and absolute certainty that they deserved exactly what they'd taken. The city of Los Angeles spread out beyond the windows, glittering and corrupt and theirs for the taking. And Maya Reese, fixer, killer, queen of the underworld, felt absolutely no regrets. She'd walked into Kang Minho's world as a dare. She'd stayed as a choice. And she would burn it all down before she ever left.